Oh, yeah. Hi, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Bridget Jackson here. It's lovely to have you all watching. We're just going to wait for a few minutes to give everyone the opportunity to join us. Okay. So, my name is Bridget Jackson. I am a divorce coach, a mediator, and a qualified lawyer. We are live today to answer some of your divorce and separation questions, as there's a number of followers who want questions answered. So during this webinar, if you have any questions that you want answered, then do let us know, either privately or on the posting box next to you. Yes, so moving forward, as we move into the silly season, everyone is really trying to keep up with everything that's going on in terms of around Christmas, with preparing for Christmas and making sure that you've finished work, etc. It's really can be a challenging time for couples and a very stressful time that puts a lot of stress on existing relationships who are already having issues. Knowing this and taking a breather, time apart, can be really helpful. Make sure you schedule some exercise or something that you really love doing. So putting yourself first and making sure that you make plans to diffuse any tension or situations that arise over the Christmas period. So back to the task at hand. So you've joined us today for Ask Us Anything, or Ask Me Anything, actually, event, which went out on our social channels last week. And we've fielded many interesting questions and about some doubts that some people have and clarification around certain issues. So let's get into it. And obviously, if we receive any messages that are sent to us via direct message, they will be kept confidential. So what does a divorce coach actually do? Well, pretty much what we do is we're your thinking partner, your sounding board as you go through the process. We help you make the best decisions that you can make across the legal, the parenting, the financial, and the well-being, helping you make the best decisions that you can make, avoiding the mistakes and the pitfalls that so many people make as they go through the process, including myself. And we work with individuals and we work with couples. We help you to create a roadmap or a plan and navigate the whole journey from the start to the end. We do a number of different coaching programs, including how to communicate with your ex moving forward, parenting plans, how to co-parent effectively, how to prepare for mediation, new beginnings, conflict coaching, and how to manage your emotions during the process as well, just to name a few. We help people transition from being in a de facto or a married life to a single one, because obviously that's going to have huge ramifications and your life is going to change drastically in that regard. We help couples to keep their emotions in check, particularly around the relationship with your ex moving forward, and in relation to your children, and when legal issues, for example, need to be addressed. And we help you to move past and recover from the pain of divorce, because on average it takes about 3 years for people to get through the process. So it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen, and really it is about separating with dignity. So another question that we've received from someone in the audience is, how do I tell my partner and children regarding my separation, regarding my divorce? So in terms of your partner, you need to avoid blame. Both of you need to avoid blame. Don't ambush your spouse or your partner. You need to prepare and have a script, okay, of what you are going to say to ensure that the start of the process is how you want to finish, and that's obviously in an amicable way. Pick a private place. Definitely a cafe is a no-no in terms of having that conversation there. Be prepared, and be prepared for and ready for anger, because obviously if you're the initiator, for example, your partner will be at a different grief process than you will be in terms of this, if this is the first time they've heard about it. I liken it to a running race. So if you're the initiator, you've run the running race past the finish line and your partner is still at the start line. So inevitably you are going to be at different stages of grief as you go through this process. What I find is that a lot of people, particularly women, leave a relationship emotionally 2 years before they actually leave physically. It's very, very common. As I've said, you've got to plan what you're going to say and the way that you say it. Stay calm, but it's okay to not be okay, because you've been in this relationship with this person for a period of time. So inevitably it's going to be a really difficult conversation to have. If you are going to have a trial separation, then say it. But if you're not going to, and you've decided that you want to permanently separate, you actually need to leave no stone unturned in terms of maintaining that there is going to be a trial separation if that's not the case. Avoiding false hopes and promises, and making sure that you maintain your boundaries during this time as well. It's also very important when you've had that discussion, your other partner needs some time to process, and you do as well. So allow for at least a week or so to actually have the conversation about the logistics and what that looks like. That first conversation is not about having logistics and what it looks like in terms of the care of the children and the relationship property and who's going to live where at that first conversation that you have. And then someone was asking about, so how to have the conversation with your children. Well, this is going to take more than a couple of minutes, but just to give you a couple of pointers, the biggest thing is do not disparage your partner, husband, wife to your children. This is vitally important. It is a do not do. You've got to be supportive of each other through this process, and back each other up, have each other's back, because the long-term ramifications where children are involved with parents disparaging each other is massive, and it's very detrimental. So do not do it. Show a unified front. Agree in advance in terms of a script of what you're going to say to the children, and be on the same page about that. And even prepare some questions in terms of questions that you might get asked by the children. For example, am I still going to be able to see my friends? Am I going to be going to the same school? Those sort of things that kids get concerned about. And another thing that's very important, we call this divorce disclosure, and there's been a lot of research done with this, and it's commonplace. Children really want to have both parents present when they have that discussion with them. So that's I can't stress either. This is vitally important that you are both there at that conversation. And I would do it, obviously you don't do it around anyone's birthdays, any sort of events, or there's going to be other people in the house. You need to do it at a time where there's an opportunity for you as mum and dad, or mum and mum, or dad and dad, are able to actually spend the weekend, for example, being around the house once you've had that conversation. Because children take time, like anyone, to process it. So they might not come back to you till the following day and go, well, look, mum or dad, I want to talk more about this, and this is how I feel. All right. So a few tips there, but there's so much more that we can talk about in the future in relation to that. And do you need to employ a lawyer? The fundamental thing is that it's prudent for you to get your settlement agreement certified by independent lawyers. All right. You both need an independent lawyer. You can't have one lawyer, and they will be acting independently for both of you. All right. So, in the first instance, there needs to be full and frank disclosure of everything that you own and owe. And what we do with Unequal Exes is that you can work through everything with us, as I alluded to before, the legal, the parenting, the financial well-being in your career, and we can informally mediate or have facilitated conversations about the care of your children and your relationship property. And then there's any agreement made in relation to that one of your lawyers will actually draft up the settlement agreement, which will then be given to the other lawyer. Okay. Saving you time and a lot of money. The next question that I've got here is, how do I manage my finances now that I'm single? And this is very, very scary for a lot of people, understandably. So the first thing you need to know moving forward is that, what are my expenses? What does that look like for me? Make sure you put together an Excel spreadsheet in terms of that. Set yourself up a budget. You need a budget. And moving into two different households is going to make it obviously more expensive for the whole family for many reasons. Find somebody, a professional or a friend or a family member, who can make you accountable in terms of this. It's really important, because you need to be able to stick to it. Because as we know, there's no money tree in our backyards, is there? There really isn't. Set some financial goals and ensure you follow them. And this can really, I can't, stress this enough either. If our car is broken down, we go to a mechanic. If we need some help in terms of learning how to have financial freedom and be financially empowered, we create a team, okay? Whether that's a financial coach, a financial advisor, whatever that looks like for you. And we can help you in terms of referring you to someone who meets your needs in that regard. You've got to make sure that you pay down your debt. You've got to re-establish your credit rating as an individual. You've got to work out ways to cut costs from the start, particularly in today's environment with the economy and the world as it is going through times of real struggle and difficulty. Creating an emergency fund is an absolute yes, and this will ensure this limits the anxiety that comes from having unplanned expenses. So most of all, the biggest thing is taking it step by step, lots of planning, and creating a financial plan for your future, because it's not just about today, it's about tomorrow for you. And what's it going to look like in terms of moving forward with your retirement? Think about long term, 10, 20 years ahead. So the next question that we've got is, how do we co-parent together, and any ideas on how to make this work or easier? Well, the first thing that everyone needs to know is that being a really effective co-parent takes work every single day from the spouses. It's continuous work and development that you need to do. And you're always going to have learnings. It really is about taking where you are now and improving that relationship, because obviously your relationship has changed from being an intimate relationship to that of a co-parent. At the end of the day, it's got to be the kids first, parents second. So always have that in your mind, that I've got to be acting in the best interests of our children. Really important. You don't want to have any regrets in terms of how you've gone through this process. So the first thing is, having a parenting plan is really useful to set out care of children arrangements and expectations. It reduces and prevents future conflict. So whether in the first instance you've got an interim plan, which you might have for 3 months or 6 months, or you might, and then it might need to be reviewed. Is it working in terms of 50-50 split in terms of the children? Is there a better way that we can do it? What's working and what's not working? Always great to review these, at least on a yearly basis, as the kids get older. Now, I highly recommend that you use a parenting app, because that gives you one platform of communication, instead of email and texts and phone calls. The Lights of Our Family Wizard is really brilliant. It moderates your written communication if that starts to get negative and out of hand. There's expense logs, there's schedules. It does cost. There are other apps that we can give you information about that are free, but worldwide, that is the most commonly used and effective parenting app. So I recommend that. Keep your conversations focused on the children, because that's what you've got in common at this stage is your children. Coming back to communicating respectively about each other. Do not disparage your ex to the children, as we've talked about. Never put the children in the middle of a conflict or use them as messengers between the both of you. That's an absolute no-no as well. Also, you cannot rely on your children to support you during this process. It's up to you to support your children during the process. And if you have to bring externals in, professionals like counsellors, psychologists, do it. Counselling for kids is available at school freely, so I definitely make use of that if that's needed. You know your child. Have they changed? Are they reacting differently during this because you're in the middle of this process? Be aware. Sit down with them and have family meetings. How are you? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? Make sure the teachers know that you've separated. Vitally important. Vitally important. Try to accept that you may have a different parenting style from your ex. And how are we going to accommodate that? How's that going to work to the benefit of our children with our different parenting styles? Help your children to feel connected to the other parent, particularly, if you've been the main caregiver and now it's an opportunity for the other part to actually have the opportunity to have some more time with their children than they've had in the past. And, plan for tasks and activities and events. You can both sit down as co-parents and say, well, look, this is how it's going to work in my household. How is it going to work in yours? Are there any differences? Are there any similarities? Are we on the same page? Yeah. So the next question is, how do I prepare for mediation? Or as we call it within Equalexes, we like to call it facilitated conversation. So, and mediation is a voluntary process. It gives couples the option to plan your futures rationally in an environment that is cooperative and has mutual respect. So what you do is you meet with a trained neutral mediator, an impartial third person, to resolve your issues. It only becomes legally binding when there is agreement that's reached, there's a mediation agreement or a written contract is reached. So in terms of mediation in the divorce process, there may be issues that you have in relation to care of the children, child support, property division, communication, whatever it is, that is available there as an alternative to dispute resolution option, which hands down is more preferable than going to court for many, many reasons. Obviously, firstly, the cost involved. And, make sure that when you go to the mediation, you'll have intake sessions with your mediator or prepare for mediation coaching, and make sure that you're on time. And you really need to take into account things like, what are you wearing? What is that saying about me? What about my body language? Is me folding my arms, whether I'm on Zoom or in person, what's the other party going to think in terms of that? How it's thinking about, in terms of putting yourself in the other party's shoes. How are they going to be feeling? What sort of mindset are you in and perspective? What do you actually want out of this? And be ready to discuss those different areas that you may be focusing on, as we've briefly touched on, whether it's relationship, property, or care of the children. Be prepared. Have all your documentation ready, whether that's your parenting plan, whether that's your financials, child support, whatever that looks like. Be prepared. Put together some proposals. Have some planned. have some suggestions. And if you put a proposal forward and it's not agreed by the other party, then ask for an alternative. Yes, no, maybe. If it's no or maybe, then what's an alternative to the proposal that I've offered? Because it is a two-way process going through this. It's really, really difficult to be in the same room sometimes with your partner, ex-partner, and be prepared that you could get upset. Absolutely, 100%. But what is really effective before you go into a mediation is to undertake some emotional management coaching. The likes of what triggers you about each other, and how can we flip that switch and change the way that we communicate with each other. Fundamentally important. We'll do another webinar and talk about this in more depth, because I think it's vitally important that you've got to show up there fully prepared, emotionally, physically, and obviously have all your documentation ready to go, and have developed proposals that potentially could be acceptable to both parties. Once again, coming back to have no regrets about the way that you want to have no regrets about the way that you've acted in the future, looking back, whether that's in 6 months, 12 months, or 5 years. Right, this is a very, very common one that we get asked is, how do I deal with a difficult ex-spouse? Well, the first thing is you've got to create clear boundaries. Very, very important to do that. You've got to keep the contact basic and professional. For example, implementing the BIF, which is any sort of email communication, make it brief, informative, firm, and friendly. Don't get tied up in escalating the conflict with a return email that is full of you did this and you did that, rather than neutral statements. Realize that you don't always need to communicate back. Every text or every email doesn't require communication back. Okay, particularly if it's going to escalate the conflict. And I think the thing is, you need to take time out before you reply, rather than frantically writing a quick response and going, right, I think the thing to think about is, if I was in front of a judge, would I be sending that text? If I was sending this to my child, or my child was seeing this, would I be sending that communication? So there's some breathing, stopping, thinking about your communication before you actually do it. Writing an email but not sending it until you've had a night to sleep on it and really think about what I've said. Is this going to increase the conflict between us? Can I say this a different way? Always thinking about acting in the best interest, if appropriate, if you have got children, in terms of my response. Is this going to get me any further ahead? Keeping your cool, because dealing with high conflict personalities, they know what pushes your buttons. They know what triggers you. They know what upsets you, particularly if you've lived with them for a long time. So it's learning how to mitigate that, putting some strategies in place for you so you're able to manage your emotions when you are dealing with someone who has got a high conflict personality. Journaling, self-affirmations, as we've just talked about, actually stopping and giving yourself some time out before you reply, if you do reply, if it's necessary to actually reply. It's much easier said than done, and it doesn't happen overnight. But as I've said, if you can work consistently on this in terms of being able to navigate communicating with your difficult spouse, it's going to make life a whole lot easier for you particularly anxiety-wise, and obviously for the children who are in the middle of it. The next question is, what do the children need to know, and what shouldn't they know? Well, the first thing is, both of you as a unified front need to actually put together a script that you're on the same page about. So sit down and have a meeting. We work through this in Equal Access as well, is how we're going to say it and what are we going to say. And, for that first conversation, it's emotional acceptance and adjustment for the children. Let them know that mum and dad will always love you, and that's never going to change, regardless of whether we're in one household or two. And that, you're working on the details of it all, and you'll let them know in due course. That first conversation, just like it is with your ex-to-be, you don't give them the logistics of all of what that looks like. Realizing that they're going to be scared and frightened and it's all new for them, just reassure them. Reassure that everything's going to be okay. Constantly during this discussion, you're going to have to reassure them. They're not there to reassure you. You need to reassure them. All right? And if you get upset, that is okay. If they get upset, which I'm sure they will, that is normal as well. All right? What you tell them, obviously, and what you don't tell them is depending on their age. A couple of things that they do not need to know about is any of the financial details, if there's any court proceedings or affairs that have taken place. They are no-nos. But do remember that they are powerful lie detectors, children, and they understand more than what adults give them credit for, because they've lived it in your household. They've felt the tension. Children are not immune to what's going on in terms of your relationship whilst you were together and the unhappiness. It's very, very clear to children that things aren't going well. But do be transparent to them, and what they really want to know is that Dad's going to pick us up tomorrow from school. There's going to be a meal on the table. We can still go and play with our friends. We're still going to the same school, and mum and dad still love us very much. And, one of the positives of going through separation for children is they become very self-sufficient. They end up having a lot of empathy for other children, for example, because the rates here in New Zealand are reaching, about 60% of people separating now. So it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for children to know many of their friends who have been through the divorce and separation process. So, yeah, that's just the way it is, unfortunately, now. So just moving on. So I actually think I just answered them. No, and what they shouldn't know. So moving on to how do I move on, as in, new beginnings? Well, the most important thing that you need to do from the start of this process, which is easier said than done, onto your new beginnings, is actually prioritizing your self-care. So making sure that you have time out to do things that you really enjoy doing, whether that's just lying on your bed and reading a book, or spending time with friends and family who support you, having time for yourself to actually rebuild yourself. Because when you're going through divorce and separation, you actually lose your identity and you lose your purpose, and you just don't know who you are anymore. And my life has been this way for a certain number of years, and now it's changing, and it's sort of like staring down a dark tunnel and not seeing at the end, not being able to see what's at the end of it. However, you have made the decision to separate for whatever reason, and you have to be congratulated about that, because you have to be happy in life. Life is too short to be unhappy. The old saying is, life is not a dress rehearsal, and it certainly isn't. Live while you're living, as they say. So focus on gratitude and rediscover or find new hobbies and new interests. What makes you happy? What's something you'd really like to do and you haven't tried? Consider joining a support group or, finding a group of friends who are single and coming back to setting boundaries and thinking about how you're communicating with your ex. That's going to help you move on. If you've got an effective co-parenting relationship, well, there's always room for improvement. But if you feel like you're always trying to move it to the next level of positivity, that's a really good step. Don't put anything about your separation on social media for many reasons that could end up in court. I just think, this is the sort of stuff, your dirty laundry, it doesn't need to be aired. So do not do it. You'll see others doing it, but it doesn't mean you need to do it for many reasons. You don't know where it's going to end up in the hands of who. The next question that we get is, how do I tell my family and friends? And for those that live in your city, obviously it's best to tell them face to face, but spare the details. You don't need to go into the all this sort of details of your separation. I highly recommend that both parties actually sit down and have a chat about what are we actually going to say to people. So for people who don't live in Auckland and you feel like they need to know, send people an email. I just want to let you know that so-and-so and I are getting a divorce. It's been a difficult decision. We will need our friends and family to support both of us. I hope you respect our privacy and remain friends with both of us. It's as simple as that. And then people will make up their own decisions in terms of how they approach the fact that you've separated. But you're going to have no regrets if you're able to sit down and agree in terms of what's said and what's not said. Less is more. Less is more. So next question is, how do I navigate a high conflict divorce? Well, once again, it's staying calm, maintaining careful and respectful communication from your end, because two wrongs don't make a right. Don't apologize, because a high conflict spouse, inevitably one of the traits is that they will blame you for everything, including their problems. And an apology won't change the anger at all. It's just going to escalate the conflict, because they like attention, whether it's positive or negative attention, but preferably negative attention is what they want. So you want to stop that. And that's going to help with managing your emotions through this process with someone who's high conflict. One of the things you need to realize that you can only be responsible for your own actions and your own behaviors. You can't be responsible for your partner and the way that they act. You can't control that. You can only manage the way that you react to their behavior. Yeah, you can't be responsible for anyone else and forcing them to change and to act like how you want them to be. Don't make hasty decisions. Get some help with the likes of ourselves. We can help you with strategies and tools, being able to manage that. And unfortunately, with high conflict personalities, separations usually take a year or two or more to actually settle, because of the high conflict nature, the acrimonious nature of these separations. But we've walked in your shoes, we've been through it within this business, so we'd be really happy to help you. And coming back to be diligent about your self-care, because dealing with a high conflict personality is like a roller coaster as a separation. It's just a bigger roller coaster, or even a tsunami. It's difficult. You don't know what's going to come at you when. But just be rest assured that putting those boundaries in place, not replying to messages because they don't actually warrant a response. This is all trying to kick you off the pedestal and upset you. And the more upset you are, the more that they've felt like they've won. We will do another webinar completely on how to navigate a high conflict divorce, because there's just so much information that people need as they go through this process. Now, another question is, how do I tell my friends to butt out of separation? Now, friends and family do play a part in this, which actually can be a negative thing and a positive thing, depending on who they are and what they say to you. You know, one of the most important things is no one knows your scenario, only you really, in terms of what goes on behind closed doors. And friends are really well-meaning in terms of this, but it is common for exes to pump common friends for information. So coming back to less is more. People don't need to know all the intricacies of what's happened in your separation. You know, the professionals will need to know, obviously, in terms of whatever area they're working in that relates to you. But once again, keep off social media. You don't need to be telling it all and sundry. People love divorce. They love the gossip. You know, they love the negativity that's associated with it, and you know, the fact that so-and-so may have had an affair or whatever. So try and keep out of all of that. You've got enough going on, and that's just white noise in the background that you don't need to worry about. You forget that's even there. The reality is that you will lose some friends, and there will be friends who potentially you thought that wouldn't be there. This may be a conscious decision for you or for them. So you just have to go along with that and surround yourself with people who aren't toxic and who support you in a positive way, who add value to your life and you add value to them. You know, if your friends want to keep talking about it, then tell them that, look, it is a very difficult time and you understand that they're trying to help, but you prefer not to talk about it right now. You can talk about it with us, you know, with divorce coaches, counselors, psychologists, who are equipped to help you navigate this process and work through, as we say, moving from the story of divorce to the business of divorce. It's a business transaction. You've got to get out of your being stuck. You've got to let go. You're going to be able to move forward from that. You don't want to be there 7 years later, still talking about it with your friends. You know, in terms of your friends, you know, it's important to say, well, this time together is a sacred time away from, you know, what's going on in my scenario, my personal life. Have some fun, have some laughs, do something different. If you do need support and you feel comfortable, tell them what you do need. If there is a friend that you feel you can get that from, right now I need support and a non-judgmental listening ear. And tell them what your expectations are in terms of that. I don't need you to solve my problems. I just need to voice what is going on in my head. Give them clarity, making it very clear in terms of what you're expecting. Listening ear. So those are just a few quick answers to some of the questions that some of our followers have put to us recently, and we'll be doing another webinar and, you know, some of these topics in more depth. Love to hear from you. If there's a topic that you want some clarity on moving forward, we'd be happy to answer that for you. So thanks for spending time with me today and tuning in the Ask Me Anything session. We hope that you've learned something today and that we've been able to help you in terms of the scenario that you're potentially going through or someone that you know. We have got a free 15-minute call that you can book on our website, equalexes.com, or reach out to one of our social channels, Insta, Facebook, LinkedIn, and yeah, so thank you very much for joining me today and look forward to chatting to you all again soon. Bye now.